Day 1. Even though I have a regular diary, I'm going to use this to log about the weird crap happening at work. As an explanation, I work at a nursing home in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's a 3-floor facility with a maximum capacity of 500 residents in their own private rooms. I won't state the name of the place since it would break my HIPAA contract, but I'll give as much info as I can. Normally everything is really average. Lots of beeping, old people crying, staff talking, all the awful smells you can expect from an establishment filled with incontinent adults. It's a far cry from glamorous on a good day and downright nasty on a bad one, but generally the atmosphere hovers in the middle. Usually you can tune out the background noise, and you become noseblind to the regular smell of antiseptic and full adult briefs. The weird comes in the form of most of the staff thinking the 50-year-old building is haunted. To be fair, hundreds of people have died in there. Many of those were depressed, unloved, and unwanted elderly people. I could see where a few of those people would hang around. A few of the highly religious among staff even believe there are demons roaming the halls. Personally, I'm not sure. I've been there about 2 months as a part-time housekeeper on the first floor, which is the floor for people recovering before going home. None of those residents are permanent. Not too many have up and died on that floor. Not much goes on. Things have gone missing or shown up in weird places, but I feel pretty safe. Floor 2 is for long-term residents who have no mental problems. They're as average as you can expect. I haven't gotten to spend much time there, so I can only report what others have told me. Staff on the second floor talk about seeing residents who have passed away walking the halls, sometimes showing up at the nurse's station asking the charge nurse questions. It's freaky, but no one ever seems to feel threatened. That's where the top floor comes in. The third floor is reserved exclusively for residents with diseases like Alzheimer's, late-forming personality disorders, violent outbursts, etc. I was only up there once, but it wasn't fun. In Arkansas, residents have the right to scream and hit themselves or even throw themselves to the floor. As long as they don't injure other residents, the nurses aren't allowed to stop them unless they're really hurting themselves. So, imagine walking onto a ward that's nearly dead silent except for periodic screaming from far off down the halls. You don't even hear any TVs because 90% of the elderly are loopy from their antipsychotic meds and don't care about anything. The nursing staff is so jaded they don't look like they even hear it anymore. I hate going up there, and I'm always glad to not be there when I hear about all the stories of residents suddenly choking to death on nothing. Sometimes the nurses talk about seeing shapes like white shadows moving across the walls in the middle of the day. The shadows slip into the patient rooms, then the door will slam shut and the resident inside starts screaming. By the time the CNAs get the door open, the poor old person will be splayed out on the floor covered in bruises and very much dead. I wouldn't be nearly as bothered by all this, but I've been offered a full-time position to work on the third floor. As much as it freaks me out, I have to accept it. Right now I'm only part-time on the first floor. Switching will give me $1 raise per hour, 15 more hours a week, and medical benefits. I can't afford to turn down that kind of offer. So, I thought it might be fun to keep a catalog of anything crazy, creepy, weird that might go on. Wish me luck! On the first day in the ACU, Alzheimer care unit for all you lucky enough not to work in a medical establishment, and there's already been a death. I don't think it can be connected to the stories I heard though. I overheard that it was a diabetic seizure, but maybe it was one of the White Shadow's victims. So spook. I also haven't seen the White Shadow yet. It's only the first day though, so there's still plenty of time for ghostly activity. Day 11. Sorry for not logging every day, but I've been really tired. All those extra hours are taking it out of me. Anyone who's ever worked housekeeping/janitorial work will understand what I mean. It sounds easy to just clean all day, but it is a physically taxing occupation. Anyway, the third floor is just as creepy as I described. We're allowed to have one earbud in to listen to music while we work, and I wholeheartedly do so. On the first floor, I used to listen to creepypasta while I worked. I could get so distracted by the stories that I wouldn't even realize I was working until hours later when all my work was finished. On my first day on floor 3, I tried to do the same, but I got so freaked out I had to turn on an Alice in Wonderland audiobook to distract myself. Aside from the screaming and the crying, my first few days were actually pretty normal. There was that death my first day, but there's not enough correlation between what I've heard and what happened with that man to say for sure if it fits. Today, though, some shit went down. I've been talking to a CNA, I'll call him Thomas, who works the same shift as I do on that floor. He's into some of the same stuff as me. Likes creepypasta and horror movies, listens to similar music. We get along pretty well, and we're the only 2 people under 30 working up there. I was getting near the end of my lunch break and just standing there talking to Thomas about a concert he's going to next weekend. Everything had been really quiet the whole day, and we were only an hour or so out from clock out time, so we were pretty relaxed when all of a sudden, we both see this white thing move out of the corner of our eyes. In unison, we turn our heads and instantly the door to Mr. Marsh's room slams shut so hard the wind from it blows my hair back. Thomas vaulted over the desk and tried the door handle, but it won't even turn. From inside, we could hear the elderly man yell once before it was cut off. As soon as he heard the scream, Thomas was kicking at the door, trying to get it down. It took him 3 tries to bash the door in by kicking the part just under the doorknob, but he got it down and we both ran in. Mr. Marsh had slipped out of his recliner where he'd been napping. He was now on the floor. A puddle of blood was seeping from under his head, it was smeared all over his face, and there was a long spray of it across the bottom of the white curtain beside him. I was in shock, staring at the gory scene before me when something near my foot caught my attention. I looked down, and my lunch instantly came up the back of my throat and spilled all over the floor. It was a poor old man's tongue flopping near my shoe. More CNAs and nurses rushed in then, and one of them grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me out of the room. I got sat in the break room with some hot coffee and anti-nausea medication. I had to write out a statement of my view of events to put in the report. My manager got the other 2 housekeepers to finish the little bit I had left to clean on my haul and sent me home early. If you're wondering, yeah, Mr. Marsh is dead. Way dead. Not only did he bite off his own tongue, but he bashed the back of his head in on the floor. Not too surprising, to be honest, since the bones and skulls of old people are super soft and fragile. But having seen it in person is so much worse than I thought. I'll talk to Thomas tomorrow and see what he thinks happened. Personally, I think I saw my first instance of the ghost. Day 12. Thomas talked to me about what happened yesterday. He told me that this wasn't the first door kicking he's committed. Since these weird instances started happening, it's become acceptable to kick down the doors as long as there's cause to think the resident is in danger. The administrator herself made the order. Thomas said that's the first time that he's seen anyone bite through their own tongue like that. Usually someone will choke on their tongue during a seizure, but usually an elderly person who isn't even wearing their dentures has a hard time biting through such a tough piece of muscle. He was getting nervous while we were talking, but I kept pressing until he finally admitted what had gotten to him. When the doors first started getting jammed, all locks were removed from the doors on the 3rd floor resident rooms. So, when he went to open the door yesterday, nothing mechanical was holding that door closed. He couldn't understand it. He and the maintenance man had gone back after the body was removed and the room cleaned to inspect the door mechanism, only to find there was nothing out of place. It's more like someone was holding the doorknob from the other side to keep me from being able to turn it, Thomas told me. There was nothing else to hold it closed like that. Day 16. Another resident became a victim to the ghost. Thankfully, I didn't witness this one, but it did happen on my hall. I ended up having to deep clean the room because the woman sprayed vomit all across the walls. Thomas and I decided to partner up on this. Both of us are completely freaked out, but also incredibly curious. We're going to share information to each other whenever one of us learns anything new. Hopefully, it'll be a while before I report another death. Day 25. For a week now, nothing new has happened. It's been pretty average. One of the comatose residents went to the hospital because her heart was becoming irregular, but that's been the height of excitement. On a less creepy note, Thomas and I are getting along really well. Wink wink. Maybe the whole ghost nonsense is doing some good after all. We're going to see a show this weekend and have been spending our lunches together to hash out all the facts about the paranormal activity at work. Basically just theorizing about it until we go off topic. Day 29. Miss Anne, the comatose woman, came back from the hospital last night. I went into her room to clean like usual and about died of fright when she said hello to me. In nearly a month of cleaning her room, I'd never seen her awake. That blew me away, but unnerved me too. She's an ancient woman in her early hundreds. I think she's 103 years old. For my whole stint on the 3rd floor, she has laid in her bed looking like a shrunken, pallid, wrinkled thing. I can't even say she looked like a person, to be quite frank with you all. At best, she looked like a breathing mummy without any wrappings. There had barely been any hair left to her. Her skin was thin and kinda yellowish, and she was so thin you could barely tell she even had a body under the mountain of blankets she kept wrapped in. Now that she's awake and been away for a little while, she's like another person. Her skin's not as wrinkled and discolored, her cheeks are fuller, even her hair looks like it has started growing back. Aside from her sudden rejuvenation, she was just all around unnerving. The whole time I was in her room cleaning, she was having awkward, polite chat. She asked me about myself, but weird questions. She wanted to know if I smoke or drink or do drugs. At one point, she even asked if I'm sexually active, of all the weird things for a 103-year-old woman to wonder at. She sounded really pleasant, but the conversation was just so weird. Maybe tomorrow she'll go to the lunch hall with the other residents, and I'll be able to clean her room while she's gone. Day 37. This is my first day off, so I'll finally get to update. Miss Anne is simply getting creepier. I thought that maybe I'd get used to her, but nope, doesn't look to be happening. It's getting so off-putting that I thought about asking to trade her room with one of the other housekeepers. Miss Anne is getting healthier and gaining vitality every time I see her. Her skin is getting smoother and more colored, hair is growing back fuller, and she's even started walking. The woman was comatose for 3 months, on life support, but now she's up walking. I don't know about you, but to me that just reeks of something unnatural. No, I don't have any proof or even a theory yet, but I do think she's connected to the ghost somehow. She scares me. I don't understand why. An old woman who's recovering isn't anything to be afraid of, even if it is unnatural. Yesterday, she started talking to me as soon as I came in to clean and didn't stop until I told her goodbye. I didn't pay the story as much attention since I had one earbud in, but I got a feeling that something about what she was saying wasn't correct. Not sure what, since I was too freaked out by her to pay attention to what she was saying. Thomas told me there's been another death on the ward. A woman in her 50s with early onset Alzheimer's. Aside from the mental disease, she was in perfect health. The Alzheimer's had only affected her memories. It hadn't yet started on making her body forget how to work. In the middle of meal service, she just dropped dead. That's the youngest one by far. Certainly the healthiest. All the others were over 80 and their bodies had already begun to give out. Thomas doesn't know if she can be connected to the others because her age and health differences. He says that even more convincing was that there was no white shadow that marked the harbinger for the other victims. Here's my opinion. What if something were to happen that made the shadow better able to hide? What if it was strong enough now to keep us from seeing it? I got a hunch to look into before I voice it. Day 38. I was right! Okay, so a bit of a backstory is needed here. I have a family friend who works over at the hospital. Let's call her Hilda. Hilda works all over the place in there because she's been there 20 plus years. She's compassionate beyond reason, and that causes her to do a few things that are beyond her nursing duties. One of those activities is sitting with the dying patients who have no family. I asked her if she had come across a 100-plus-year-old comatose woman who was in the hospital not too long ago. Much to my expectations, Hilda had indeed sat at the bedside of the very same dying woman I was thinking of. Hilda told me that she had been sitting with the woman after her shift ended, holding her hand so she wouldn't be alone when she passed. It was getting a bit late. Hilda had worked a long shift, and she was falling asleep next to the bed when a life support alarm began going off in the room next door. She rushed out to see what was going on to find that one of the other comatose patients on the hall had flatlined. While nurses were trying to resuscitate that person, another person across the hall flatlined as well. One after another, 15 comatose people in stable condition just up and died. The doctors were scratching their heads after all the commotion died down, but no one could come up with an explanation. Hilda went back to check on and sit with the woman who had been on the verge of death, only to find her sitting up in bed with a huge smile on her face. One guess who that woman was. No one has been able to explain the deaths yet, and it's all being kept very hush-hush. Day 39. It was in my room. It's 3:13 a.m., and I just woke up feeling like someone was choking me. When I opened my eyes, it was the white shadow sitting on my chest with its fingers around my neck. I was barely able to get it off me, throwing it to the floor, and when I did, it just looked up at me like it was confused before disappearing. The thing literally just faded out of existence on my bedroom rug. I am too afraid to go back to sleep. I'm afraid to go to work tomorrow. I called Thomas, but he didn't answer. Day 43. I've never been more afraid than I was the other night, but today was a close second. I was in Miss Ann's room cleaning, and she started talking to me about when she was a young woman my age. I was only listening a little as I was trying to drown her out with a documentary on my phone, but she mentioned the Gettysburg Address. This got my interest, and I paid her more attention. Yes, I'd have to say seeing that great man on stage giving the address was one of the proudest moments of my life, Mrs. Ann said from beside the window. I froze, and instantly she gave me a small, low chuckle. This whole time I thought you weren't paying any attention to this old woman's ramblings, she said. Her face was so self-superior and smug that for a moment I relaxed, thinking she'd just said it to get my attention. I shook myself mentally, reminding myself that this was a mental ward for the elderly, and that meant she was mental too. You almost got me, Mrs. Ann, I said to her as I went back to work. I know you've been around a long time, but Lincoln was long before even your time. I looked up to give her a reassuring smile, only to notice how she looked. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought I was in the room of a 70-year-old woman with a lot of prime left in her golden years. Not a 103-year-old who'd been on the very doorstep of death a few weeks ago. She smiled back at me as my face dropped. You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed to whisper back, Maybe I have. Maybe you are, she said, like she was correcting me. I bolted out of that room as fast as I could and went home sick. I told my manager I was throwing up, and from how pale and sweaty I was, she believed me. Day 45. I started doing some research last night on a genealogy website. I typed in Anne's name and just started copying and pasting the information I found into a separate file. Get this. There was a woman with her name present at the Gettysburg Address. Some of the upper-class families who attended signed a registry and had their photos taken. I swear to God, the Anne in that photo looked like a younger version of the woman in the nursing home. Even that smug facial expression is similar. I forwarded the info to Thomas's email. I hope he gets back to me soon on it because I feel a little too crazy for my liking. Day 46. Thomas is dead. His brother found him on the floor of his apartment this morning. Someone broke in and strangled him to death a few days ago. There weren't any marks around his neck, but he definitely choked to death. I'm going to talk to Anne. There's something connecting her to all of this. Thomas was attacked the same night I was. There's got to be a correlation. Later, day 46. Anne is missing. No nurses saw her go because 5 of them dropped dead, and the others were too busy trying to revive them and call paramedics. I quit on the spot and walked out. There is no way I can step foot in there again. To occupy me, I went back to searching for more about Anne. Not only was she at the Gettysburg Address, but she was recorded as boarding both the Hindenburg and Titanic and surviving both. A census states that she was a woman in her 40s living with her husband in Philadelphia at the time George Washington became president. She was a nurse during the Revolutionary War. One of the oldest mentions of her was as a little girl at the Plymouth colony. But here's where I found discrepancies. Anne isn't listed with those who were on the Mayflower ship that brought the Plymouth colonists. She was recorded as an old woman on the ship that brought the Roanoke colonists. That colony was supposed to have vanished completely without any survivors, but somehow Anne is in the Plymouth colony without any questions being asked. One way of explaining it is that the original Anne from the Roanoke colony was able to survive in the wild until the Plymouth settlers came and found her. Maybe she had no recollection of what had happened to her and her people, and happened to somehow be pregnant with a daughter who took her mother's name. That daughter grew up and passed her name on to her own daughter, and so on until present day. Another way to explain it is that Anne, who is an elderly woman in her new colony, absorbed the life out of her people to become the young girl the Plymouth people found. She could have repeated this cycle for hundreds of years until she ended up at the nursing home where I work. By that time, she may have let herself get too close to death, and after falling into a coma, she began subconsciously sucking the life out of the coma patients who were the only prey weak enough for her to take. Going to the hospital would have been a perfect guise to take life force out of dozens of people without anyone being suspicious. I can't explain why she wasn't able to kill me, but could take out Thomas. I do know one thing. Anne is out there roaming somewhere in the world, free to take all the lives she needs to make herself unrecognizable to anyone looking for her. I'm absolutely terrified that she's going to come after me, that she knows I know what's going on, that I'm a loose thread in need of pulling. I've talked to my sister, and she's coming by tomorrow afternoon to help me get what little I own to move in with her a few towns away. I've told her everything that's happened. She's as freaked out as I am. Admittedly, she does believe in this kind of stuff more than I do, but at this point, I'm just glad anyone is willing to take me seriously. Stay safe, everyone. I'm giving up my pursuit of Anne, the whole mystery, and leaving everything about this behind. I suggest anyone reading this to do the same.